welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really trying to cut through all the noise. The daily headlines, the geopolitical shifts.
Yeah, step back a bit.
Exactly. Our mission here is to zoom out and find those enduring little laws of life.
The universal truths, human nature, psychology, risk.
The things that just stay constant, right? Regardless of the century. We're aiming to extract some foresight by really digging into the lessons of hindsight.
It's kind of the ultimate intellectual shortcut, isn't it? We're looking for, the operating system that runs underneath all the apps.
The constants beneath the variables.
Precisely. And our sources really back this up. While sure, technology, medicine, global power, all that changes drastically.
Yeah, massively.
The core human stuff, greed, fear, jealousy, maybe overconfidence, tribal thinking. That's pretty much the same story for hundreds, maybe thousands of years.
That idea reminds me perfectly of that Warren Buffett story.
Oh, yeah? Which one?
Back in late 2009, the economy felt like it was absolutely crumbling.
Right, a scary time.
And a friend was driving Buffett around Omaha, which was hit hard, and asked him, how does the economy ever bounce back from something like this?
And Buffett, who's great at boiling things down, just replied with two questions. First, what was the best-selling candy bar in America back in 1962?
Snickers. I think I know where this is going.
And second, what's the best-selling candy bar today?
Still Snickers.
Exactly. He was saying, look, the underlying human desires for comfort, for a bit of pleasure, for something reliable, that stuff just doesn't change.
The whole environment can feel like it's burning down, but people still want their Snickers.
That's the core insight. That reliable constant.
That's really the mindset we need today, I think, looking for those Snickers-level truths. But what's also fascinating, and maybe a bit scary, is that while human behavior is constant, the world itself, the stage where all this plays out, it's just so persistently, maybe dangerously fragile.
Oh, absolutely. That fragility, that's a perfect lead-in to our first section. The illusion of certainty and unseen risk.
Yeah.
We sort of assume that big historical changes, the really consequential ones, must have big, obvious causes.
Makes sense, intuitively.
But often it seems the biggest shifts happen because of these random, tiny little accidents, things that were just impossible to predict.
History hanging by a thread, like the American Revolutionary War.
Go on.
Think about the Battle of Long Island, August 1776. It was a total disaster for George Washington. His troops were cornered, British forces everywhere, British Navy.
It really should have been over right then and there. A guaranteed rout. Washington was pinned against the East River. The British fleet was moving in to, finish the job.
But the wipeout just didn't happen. And why?
The wind, wasn't it?
Exactly. The wind direction suddenly shifted. It literally stopped the British ships from sailing up the East River to complete the trap.
So that one night, the entire future of the United States, a massive, massive consequence that all hinged on, a completely random change in the weather.
Yeah. As the historian David McCullough pointed out, if that wind had blown the other way, maybe no United States of America. That level of fragility is, it's unnerving.
And it's not just ancient history. Think about something more modern, like the sinking of the Lusitania.
Often painted as just straightforward German aggression, right?
Right. But the story's more complex. This ship was actually delayed. Why? Because the captain, William Turner, decided to shut down the fourth boiler room.
To save money.
To save a little bit on fuel costs, yeah. A seemingly minor, maybe even prudent financial decision.
But that delay
slowed the ship just enough, we're talking about maybe a single day's difference, to put it directly in the path of a German submarine.
Wow. And that torpedo strike killed almost 1,200 people. Became this huge trigger, rallying U.S. support to enter World War I.
Fundamentally changing the 20th century. All arguably stemming from a small cost-saving measure. It's incredible.
So, if history is really that fragile, how do we, operate? How does an informed person function when the biggest risks are always the ones you don't see coming?
Well, that's the core problem, isn't it? We're actually pretty good at forecasting the future, except for the surprises.
And the surprises turn out to be the only things that really matter in the long run.
Exactly. We get fooled by hindsight. We look back at disasters like, say, the Great Depression, and we think, oh, of course, it was inevitable. The signs were all there.
But they weren't obvious at the time.
Not at all. The sources show people were largely blind to the risk as it was happening. Think about this. Well-informed members of the National Economic League were polled in 1930.
Okay.
Asked about the country's biggest problems, unemployment ranked 18th.
18th. A year into the Depression.
A year later, 1931, 2 years into what we now know was a catastrophe, it only moved up to 4th place. Most smart, informed people just didn't see the scale of it coming.
So the lesson for us, for you listening, is pretty profound. You can't really plan for what you can't even imagine.
Right. The biggest risk you face isn't the one you're actively worried about mitigating, it's the one you never knew existed.
Which means the only real strategy is preparedness, not specific predictions.
Exactly, preparedness. So, thinking about personal decisions, personal finance, if you're trying to guard against the truly unseen, the black swan event, the right amount of savings, your emergency fund, it probably needs to feel a little too much, maybe even excessive.
Because the risks that really blindside you are always the ones that seem completely absurd before they happen.
Precisely.
That anxiety, though, about the unseen, the fragility, it feeds into this deeper dissatisfaction, doesn't it? Which I think brings us nicely into Section 2, the relentless rise of expectations.
Ah, yes, the human paradox. Objectively, life gets better over time, right? Better medicine, more safety, comfort.
Exactly.
But people's happiness often stays flat, or it might even go down. Why? Because our expectations rise just as fast, sometimes faster, than our circumstances improve.
It's hard to argue that someone like John D. Rockefeller, richest guy of his era, but without Advil, penicillin, even sunscreen,
basic things we take for granted,
was actually happier than, say, a lower-income American today who has access to modern basics. But that's the trap, right? We don't compare ourselves to 1900.
We compare ourselves to the people next door, our peers, our neighbors, which confirms Charlie Munger's brilliant observation.
Which one's that?
That the world isn't driven so much by greed, but by envy.
Greed is wanting more, envy is wanting what they have.
Exactly. So when your neighbor gets a new car or a bigger TV, that luxury very quickly feels like a necessity for you. Your baseline, your expectation just got reset.
That makes a ton of sense, and it really challenges that nostalgia we often hear, especially for the 1950s.
Ah, the golden age. Single earner, modest house, picket fence, perceived stability.
Yeah, that whole picture. But the stats tell a different story.
They really do. If you adjust for inflation, the median family income today is actually about twice what it was in the 1950s.
Nice.
Yep. And homeownership. It was actually 12 percentage points lower back then. Plus, people spent way more on basic needs, like food was nearly 30% of the budget then, compared to maybe 13% today.
So objectively, we're wealthier, more secure now. Why does it feel different? Why the nostalgia?
Well, a key factor seems to be lower income variance back then. Things like tighter wage controls meant the gap between the middle class and the very wealthy wasn't nearly as huge, as glaring as it is today.
Ah, so if people around you aren't living wildly different lives.
The envy factor decreases. Expectations stay more grounded in your immediate reality. A smaller gap just causes less psychological strain from constant comparison.
That's a really powerful insight. Okay, so if happiness and stability kind of rely on keeping expectations in check, how do you balance that with pursuing big goals? Starting a company, major innovation, that requires high expectations, right?
It does. And the answer seems to be adopting what you might call the rational optimist mindset. Think about Bill Gates.
Okay. Extremely optimistic, obviously. Dropped out of Harvard because he was so sure about his vision. A computer on every desk. High ambition, defined.
Totally. But, and this is crucial, the source material points out that from the very beginning of Microsoft, he insisted on always having enough cash in the bank to survive for 12 months.
Even with zero revenue coming in?
Even with zero revenue. That's pure, hard-nosed pessimism right there. Planning for the worst.
So is that blend?
It's the blend. You have to save and prepare like a pessimist. You need that buffer to survive the short-term chaos, the recessions, the unexpected shocks we talked about.
Because they will happen.
They absolutely will. But at the same time, you need to invest and dream like an optimist for the long run, because historically, innovation and progress do eventually win out.
So the advice for you, the listener, is pretty clear. You need both. You need that pessimistic preparedness to survive, and that optimistic vision to actually achieve something big.
And remember Munger's point. Maybe the first rule of a happy life really is low expectations, even while you're aiming high professionally.
It's a tricky balance.
It is. And when we let that optimism, that human ambition, run totally unchecked by reality, well, that takes us into Section 3. The forces that cannot be measured.
This is where pure logic, spreadsheets, models, they start to fail us.
Yeah. As Will Durant famously said, logic is an invention of man and may be ignored by the universe.
We build these neat, rational models, but the world is run by messy, emotional, sometimes irrational humans.
A classic military example, the Battle of the Bulge. Why did the U.S. generals underestimate Hitler's final big offensive?
Their intelligence, their logic said Germany just didn't have the resources.
Exactly. Logically, Germany lacked the troops, the fuel. The model said a massive attack was basically impossible.
But they didn't factor in the immeasurable part.
Hitler's, frankly, extreme irrationality at that point, his detachment from reality, his willingness to make this desperate, costly gamble, his decisions weren't based on logistics.
They were based on something unquantifiable? Desperation, maybe?
Something like that.
Yeah.
And you see the same failure of pure logic in Vietnam. Remember General Westmoreland?
Relied heavily on statistics, the body counts.
Right. Famously reported the U.S. was killing the enemy at a rate of 10 to 1. The data looked clear. America was winning.
But the outcome didn't match the data.
Because Ho Chi Minh apparently countered that statistic with this powerful, unmeasurable truth. You will kill 10 of us, and we will kill one of you, but it is you who will tire first.
Wow. So endurance, resolve, morale, those things outweighed the kill ratio.
Things you can't really put in a spreadsheet. The moral factor, the sheer will to keep fighting, proved decisive.
And this isn't just about war, is it? It applies elsewhere.
Absolutely. Even in something like, say, the science of physical performance. There was a Nobel laureate, Archibald Hill.
Okay.
He studied running. And he was initially convinced performance was all about pretty much. He thought it was basically a math problem. But he found his calculations, his models, consistently failed to predict who would actually win races.
Why not?
Because he realized performance isn't just about physical limits, it's about what the brain is willing to let the body endure.
The mental game.
It's regulated by the runner's perception of the stakes, the risk versus reward. He called it a hidden moral factor, something you just can't measure in a lab. It's the emotional ceiling, not just the physical one.
So if we ignore these unquantifiable forces, morale in battle, a leader's desperation, and athlete's mental toughness, our logical models will just keep getting it wrong.
We'll constantly be surprised by outcomes. Which leads perfectly into our next section, because often what drives these outcomes isn't logic or facts, it's the story.
Okay, section 4. Why the best story always wins. This feels deeply true, doesn't it? The truth itself often matters less than how it's told.
Absolutely. The best story wins, not necessarily the best idea. A brilliant concept explained poorly just fizzles out.
While a common idea, told compellingly,
can change the world. Our brains are just fundamentally wired for narrative. We connect with stories.
You even see this in huge historical moments. Think about Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech.
Iconic. Powerful.
But the most famous part, the whole I Have a Dream section, it was apparently an ad-lib. It wasn't in his prepared text.
Really? He just went off script?
Yeah. It seems he sensed in the moment that reciting statistics about inequality wasn't hitting hard enough. He needed something more immediate, more evocative.
So he switched from like policy points to pure, powerful storytelling about a shared vision. Incredible instinct.
And this isn't just about speeches. It applies to things like books, academia, too. Look at the massive success of Yuval Noah Harari's *Sapiens*.
Huge phenomenon, yeah. Read by millions.
But Harari himself apparently admitted he did zero new research for it. The facts he presented were mostly well-known among historians and anthropologists.
So nothing really new there.
Not in terms of raw data, so why did it explode?
He just wrote it better. He took that known information and wove it into these incredibly compelling, easy-to-follow narratives about human history. He made the story irresistible.
It's like the Ken Burns effect. His Civil War documentary was a sensation.
Watched by tens of millions.
But he was working with facts that were, 130 years old, covered in thousands of books already.
Right. It wasn't new information. It was the presentation. Burns is supposedly meticulous about crafting the narrative, even timing sentences to match the emotional beats of the background music.
He understands that the story, the feeling, is what sticks with people long after they forget the specific dates or statistics.
So, the takeaway for anyone listening, if you're trying to persuade someone, lead a team, sell an idea, innovate, you have to remember this.
If your idea is complex and dry, and your competitor's idea is simpler and tells a great story,
the story usually wins. Even if your spreadsheet is technically more accurate, the narrative just connects on a deeper level.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. We've covered quite a bit. This persistent fragility of the world, how tiny accidents shape huge historical outcomes.
Right, and how our own expectations keep rising, often stopping us from feeling content, even as life improves.
Then the limits of pure logic, how those unmeasurable human elements like morale, endurance, irrationality, often drive things more than data does.
And finally, the absolute power of a good story. How narrative consistently trumps raw facts or the best idea.
These seem to be the constants, the same as ever behaviors that, if we understand them, can maybe give us a bit of foresight.
Exactly. But maybe the single biggest takeaway from the sources, the most profound one, is about why we disagree so much.
Okay, it's not just about facts.
Often it has less to do with what we know and much more to do with our unique personal experiences, especially the painful ones.
The scars we carry, like from living through a recession or a health crisis or making a big life decision that went wrong.
Precisely. The wounds heal, eventually, but the scars remain, and they permanently shape how you see the world, how you perceive risk, what you believe is possible or likely.
So my lived experience of, say, a financial crash creates a worldview.
That someone who didn't live through it or experienced it differently just cannot fully grasp on an emotional level. They might understand the facts, but they don't feel the risk the same way.
Which means disagreement is kind of inevitable, eternal even, because we all have this unique collection of scars shaping our perspectives.
It seems that way. It leads us to weigh risks and opportunities completely differently based on what we've personally been through.
That leaves us with a really powerful question to end on, one from the source material that you, the listener, can reflect on this week.
It's a challenging one, requires real honesty.
Ask yourself, what haven't I experienced firsthand that leaves me naive about how something works?